So, welcome back to Managerial Accounting. Purpose of this little mini lecture is to review the take-home part of the exam. So, always good to start with the what's requested here. So, they want the cost of goods manufactured and they want the cost of goods sold. Remember, cost of goods manufactured for a manufacturer takes the place of purchases for a merchandiser. So, first we have to get the cost of goods manufactured. And to get the cost of goods manufactured, simply you have to know which of these numbers to plug in. The beginning work in process inventory plus the total amount of direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. That gives you the total manufacturing costs incurred. That gives you the total manufacturing costs. So you get the beginning inventory plus all the costs incurred this period. That gives you 149, 145. Then you subtract out the ending work in process inventory. So you get cost of goods manufactured of 125,000. Then to get cost of goods sold, it's simply beginning inventory plus the cost of goods manufactured gives us goods available minus the ending inventory gives us cost of goods sold. So cost of goods manufactured 125,500, cost of goods sold 127,500. I think just about everyone got that right. It's good to see. All right, second one, and most of you did well on this one. Some of you still screwy interpretation of journal entries. So, journalize the purchase of paper. So this is a manufacturing. It says Newport Manufacturing purchases 5 rolls of paper, 125 per roll, with use within the production process. On November 5th, 4 rolls of paper are issued to a job in the printing department. The printing department applies $675 in direct labor, 1,150 in factory overhead to job 157A. On November 8th, printing transfers job 7A to the folding department. The folding department applies $450 in direct labor and $65 in factory overhead to job 157A. And then job 157A is transferred to finished goods. So here are your entries. Journalize the entry to record the paper, purchase of paper, so that's a debit to raw materials, a credit to accounts payable. Journalize the entries for the transfer of raw materials to work in process. So that's a debit to work in process printing 500 and a credit to raw materials. And also you have wages that were incurred. Got to apply the direct labor, and the direct labor was $675. So that's a debit to work in process and a credit to wages payable. And you have factory overhead. So that's debit to work in process printing, 1,150, and a credit to factory overhead, 1,150. Now you could have combined all of those in B into one entry, and you would have had a credit to raw materials, a credit to wages payable, a credit to factory overhead, and a combined debit for all the total of those. That would be correct as well. All right. C, journalize the entry for the transfer to the folding department at actual cost. So the actual cost that you've got incurred are 2,325. So debit work in process folding, credit work in process printing. So they transferred from the printing department to the folding department. And then D, journalize the entries for the application of direct labor and the application of manufacturing overhead to 157A while in the folding department. So you get a debit to work in process folding and a credit to D now, I'm sorry. Debit work in process folding 450, credit to wages payable, and a debit to work in process folding and a credit to factory overhead. And then the last entry is you transfer the work in process and folding, you transfer that to finished goods. All right. So those are all your entries. Every journal entry has to have both the debit and the credit. And you have to do some calculations here. So these many of these numbers come from actual calculations. The numbers you need to do the calculations are up above here. But those are all the journal entries. And again, you could have combined journal entry B on November 5th into one big entry. You could have combined 2 journal entries on November 8th. You would have had one debit to work in process folding and a credit to wages payable and factory overhead. All right, the third one made this nice and simple. You didn't have to compute the equivalent units. We gave you the equivalent units. Okay, so all you needed to do was to complete the total cost here, determine the cost of goods completed and transferred out, production, and the ending work in process inventory. So you had beginning inventory of 3,500, and that beginning inventory we assume was fully complete with regard to materials. But it was not complete with regard to conversion, so it required 3,000 equivalent units of additional conversion costs, so that's 3,000 times 15. The 52,000 was started and completed, so you've got materials cost of 47 cents and conversion cost of 15 cents. That combines gives you 32,240. So that's the cost of goods transferred out to the bottling department. And then your ending inventory was 3,500 units. That was the total amount. But as far as conversion cost, there was 2,100 equivalent units. So 3,500 times 47, 2,100 times 15 gives you 1,960. So the total costs to account for are 38,150. The amount transferred out is 36,190, and the ending inventory is 1,960. And then the last one is you had to allocate overhead with activity-based costing. So what you have to do is you've got to allocate the cutting department costs, you've got to allocate sewing department costs, setups costs, inspections costs, and purchase orders cost, and you've got to allocate these costs to the handbags and to the moccasins. Okay, so with handbags, the amount that goes to cutting. So cutting, your total cost is 40,000. Your total amount, your total volume there is 100,000 units. So 100,000 units divided by 40,000 divided by 100,000, and then multiply that by 60 because that's the number of hours, direct labor hours for handbags. So that gives you 24,000. With regard to sewing, you had 210,000 worth of costs. You had 140,000 worth of direct labor hours. So that's the rate that you use. You multiply by 60,000. Those were the direct labor hours for the handbags. So that gives you 90,000. And then setups, you had $80,000 worth of setups, and you had the total number of setups is 800. So 80,000 divided by 800 multiplied by 500, which is the number of setups you had for handbags. So that gives you 50,000. And then quality inspections, you had $20,000 worth of costs, and you had 1,000 inspections. So 20,000 divided by 1,000 multiplied by 200 inspections for handbags. So that gives you 4,000. And then purchase orders, you had 10,000 as your total cost, and you have to divide that amongst 400 purchase orders. So 10,000 divided by 400 times 100 gives you 2,500. So if you add those all together, you get total factory overhead of 170,500, and you made 60,000 handbags. So the factory overhead for each handbag is $2.84. With regard to moccasins, again, you had 40,000 was the total amount. You had 100,000 hours, but you only had 40,000 hours to make the moccasins. Multiply that out gives you 16. Sewing, you had 210,000, and you had total direct labor hours there of 140 multiplied by 80,000 for the moccasins. That gives you 120. Setups, you had total cost of 800,000 divided by 800, and then you had 300 setups for the moccasins. That gives you 30,000. Quality inspections, you had $20,000 worth of cost. You had 1,000 inspections, so 20,000 divided by 1,000 multiplied by the number of inspections for moccasins, which was 800. Okay, so 1,000 times 800 gives you 20,000 divided by 1,000 times 800 gives you 16,000. And purchase orders, you had $10,000 worth of purchase orders. You had 400 total purchase orders. So 10,000 divided by 400 multiplied by 300. That gives you 7,500. So your total amount of factory overhead allocated to the moccasins was 189,500, and you made 40,000 moccasins. So your unit cost is $4.74. All right. So hope you found that review useful. If you have any questions after this review, just ask me in the next class. Take care, everybody. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.